but they went past her door and on to the corridor's end. There she could faintly hear them entering compartments, demanding names, and saying, "Out! Out!" Once she heard a Gurn say, "Acceptables will remain inside until further notice. Do not open your doors after the rejects have been taken out." Billy touched her on the hand. "Isn't Daddy going to come?" He can't right now. We'll see him pretty soon." She remembered what the Gurn commander had said about the rejects being permitted to take their personal possessions. She had very little time in which to get together what she could carry. There were 2 small bags in the compartment, and she hurried to pack them, with things she and Dale and Billy might need, not able to know which of them, if any, would be rejects. Nor could she know whether she should put in clothes for a cold world or a hot one. The Gurn commander had said the rejects would be left on an Earth-type planet, but where could it be? The Dunbar expedition had explored across 500 light-years of space and had found only one Earth-type world, Athena. The Gurns were almost to her door when she had finished, and she heard them enter the compartments across from her own. There came the hard, curt questions, and the command, "Outside! Hurry!" A woman said something in pleading question, and there was the soft thud of a blow, and the words, "Outside! Do not ask questions!" A moment later, she heard the woman going down the corridor, trying to hold back her crying. Then the Gurns were at her own door. She held Billy's hand and waited for them with her heart hammering. She held her head high and composed herself with all the determination she could muster, so that the arrogant Gurns would not see that she was afraid. Billy stood beside her, as tall as his 5 years would permit, his teddy bear under his arm, and only the way his hand held to hers showed that he too was scared. The door was flung open, and 2 Gurns strode in. They were big, dark men, with powerful, bulging muscles. They surveyed her and the room with a quick sweep of eyes that were like glittering obsidian, their mouths thin, cruel slashes in the flat, brutal planes of their faces. "Your name?" snapped the one who carried a sheaf of occupation records. "It's—" She tried to swallow the quaver in her voice and make it cool and unfrightened. "Irene Lois Humboldt, Mrs. Dale Humboldt." The Gurn glanced at the papers. "Where is your husband?" "He was in the X-ray room at—" "You are a reject. Out! Down the corridor with the others." "My husband, he will... Outside!" It was the tone of voice that had preceded the blow in the other compartment, and the Gurn took a quick step toward her. She seized the 2 bags in one hand, not wanting to release Billy, and swung back to hurry out into the corridor. The other Gurn jerked one of the bags from her hand and flung it to the floor. "Only 1 bag per person," he said, and gave her an impatient shove that sent her and Billy stumbling through the doorway. She became part of the rejects who were being herded like sheep down the corridors and into the port airlock. There were many children among them, the young ones frightened and crying, and often with only one parent or an older brother or sister to take care of them. And there were many young ones who had no one at all, and were dependent upon strangers to take their hands and tell them what they must do. When she was passing the corridor that led to the X-ray room, she saw a group of rejects being herd up it. Dale was not among them, and she knew then that she and Billy would never see him again. "Out from the ship! Faster! Faster!" The commands of the Gurn guards snapped like whips around them as she and the other rejects crowded and stumbled down the boarding ramp and out onto the rocky ground. There was the pull of a terrible gravity, such as she had never experienced, and they were in a bleak, barren valley, a cold wind moaning down it and whipping the alkali dust in bitter clouds. Around the valley stood ragged hills, their white tops laying out streamers of wind-driven snow, and the sky was dark with sunset. "Out from the ship! Faster!" It was hard to walk fast in the high gravity, carrying the bag in one hand and holding up all of Billy's weight she could with the other. "They lied to us," a man beside her said to someone. "Let's turn and fight. Let's take—" A Gurn blaster cracked with a vivid blue flash, and the man plunged lifelessly to the ground. She flinched instinctively and fell over an unseen rock, the bag of precious clothes flying from her hand. She scrambled up again, her left knee half numb, and turned to retrieve it. The Gurn guard was already upon her, his blaster still in his hand. "Out from the ship! Faster!" The barrel of his blaster lashed across the side of her head. "Move on! Move on!" She staggered in a blinding blaze of pain and then hurried on, holding tight to Billy's hand, the wind cutting like knives of ice through her thin clothes, and blood running in a trickle down her cheek. "He hit you," Billy said. "He hurt you." Then he called the Gurn a name that 5-year-old boys were not supposed to know, with a savagery that 5-year-old boys were not supposed to possess. When she stopped at the outer fringe of rejects, she saw that all of them were out of the cruiser, and the guards were going back into it. A half-mile down the valley the other cruiser stood, the rejects out from it and its boarding ramps already withdrawn. When she had buttoned Billy's blouse tighter and wiped the blood from her face, the first blast of the drives came from the farther cruiser. The nearer one blasted a moment later, and they lifted together, their roaring filling the valley. They climbed faster and faster, dwindling as they went. Then they disappeared in the black sky, their roaring faded away, and there was left only the moaning of the wind around her, and somewhere a child crying. And somewhere a voice asking, "Where are we? In the name of God, what have they done to us?" She looked at the snow streaming from the ragged hills, felt the hard pull of the gravity, and knew where they were. They were on Ragnarok, the hell world of 1.5 gravity, and fierce beasts and raging fevers where men could not survive. The name came from an old Teutonic myth, and meant the last day for gods and men. The Dunbar expedition had discovered Ragnarok, and her father had told her of how it had killed 6 of the 8 men who had left the ship, and would have killed all of them if they had remained any longer. She knew where they were, and she knew the Gurns had lied to them and would never send a ship to take them to Earth. Their abandonment here had been intended as a death sentence for all of them. And Dale was gone, and she and Billy would die helpless and alone. "It will be dark so soon." Billy's voice shook with the cold. "If Daddy can't find us in the dark, what will we do?" "I don't know," she said. "There's no one to help us, and how can I know what we should do?" She was from the city. How could she know what to do on an alien, hostile world where armed explorers had died? She had tried to be brave before the Gurns, but now night was at hand, and out of it would come terror and death for herself and Billy. They would never see Dale again, never see Athena or Earth, or even the dawn on the world that had killed them. She tried not to cry, and failed. Billy's cold little hand touched her own, trying to reassure her. "Don't cry, Mama. I guess everybody else is scared too." Everyone else. She was not alone. How could she have thought she was all alone? All around her were others, as helpless and uncertain as she. Her story was only 1 out of 4,000. "I guess they are, Billy," she said. "I never thought of that before." She knelt to put her arms around him, thinking, tears and fear are futile weapons. They can never bring us any tomorrows. We'll have to fight whatever comes to kill us, no matter how scared we are. for ourselves and for